also, just let me, effectively, if you wanted to purchase a facility, it could be a 5 or 6 year term PPA relative to any
So
obligation.
that's one point we did not emphasize enough, I think, here, is that when you purchase it, you get rid of us doing operations and maintenance, you get rid of some other things that were going on, you should be able to lower the cost. We have to do certain things to be able to satisfy your requirements that we're taking care of it, but we only have to do it ourselves because we are separate and we're distinct. If we weren't distinct and it was your project, you could lower the cost. We think that estimate is probably on the order of about $10 a megawatt hour. It stopped at first, and if you were to go to a prepay, eventually, once the debt is prepaid, the capital is prepaid, the operations and maintenance is about $10 a megawatt hour. So if you could fund it, you squish it together in the prepaid format, that would be the running cost.
What's the upfront cost?
The upfront cost.
I don't know that you want to talk about that here because that's still confidential.
It's confidential.
Right.
Let's just, I put it this way, there's been a lot of other disclosure. We are very much in the market, and you can see that people are generally overall all in around $2 a watt on a DC basis.
And it's important to understand that we're not asking Overton Power District to guarantee any of the cost, any of the loans. This is something that our company is going to do. And subject to your desire to purchase the power, given that we can deliver it at not more than $58 per megawatt hour during the day. I think it's also important, and forgive me, I have a little asthma. It's also important to note, I think, that through this process, Overton Power becomes more powerful and is able to negotiate these off-peak firm contracts in the evening hours. So your overall costs are $58 price during the day, and what staff is able to do with firm pricing off-peak, the average of those two is going to bring this overall average number down significantly.
We don't think, obviously, given the natural gas costs and people's expectations, that you're going to be able to do a lot better than what you did the last time around. You may be able to do a little bit better, but we don't think there's a lot of that reduction because of the distance you're buying it from, the uncertainty in investor-owned utilities. You just have to end up paying for that in some way or another. One thing I mentioned, I go back to is this. So when I say there's a potential $10 reduction, that means if it was at 58, that means we think you could run it at 48, continuing to service the capital costs that are involved in the longer term after 6 years. But if then the capital cost went away, it would drop down to about 10. Right? The actual running is probably cheaper than 10, but let's just use it as an order of magnitude. Right? Potentially there's a huge savings relative to where you're buying power. It's just a question of how compact that and over what time frame you end up extinguishing the cost of capital. You're really paying for the generating equipment, which net of the tax credit, which obviously makes it 30% cheaper right off the bat, it is, as I said, it's come down a lot and it's continuing to come down. The one thing that really, when you look at the overall cost, the one thing that's really happening is that the efficiency is getting a lot higher, so that the balance of systems, the part that you don't really want, right? You want a panel. You just want a panel to sit on the ground and generate power, but unfortunately that doesn't work that way. It's not pointing directly at the sun properly. It doesn't use the panel as well as it could, and then you need the steel to hold it up. You need the copper wire to get the power there. The panels themselves are a relatively small part of this. It's getting rid of that other part through the efficiency of the panels that's happening, and that is causing the price to continue to drop. It's moving forward, but I don't think it's going to drop 2/3 in the next 10 years either.
And that was my next question was, it said 75% on page 7, you said 75% in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So kind of where the market's trending is, in 15 years, the power purchase agreement is going to be down 150%.
I mean, this is all, if you look in all the public, the trade rags, the price of a panel right now, generically, is stated to be around 70 cents a watt. I'm not saying that's the right purchase price, but it's going down. So if you take the $2 generic, it's 35%. I think it's less than that as a percentage. But the point is that you're looking, the panel price is going down, that part is hard to press, because at some point, you're paying for the glass that encapsulates it, you're paying for the frame that goes around it, you're paying for things. It's no longer the silicon cost that's going down. The silicon cost has gone down a lot more than 75%, actually. There was a shortage, because the people basically hadn't built the factories yet. They, the world production hadn't ramped up, and then it turned into basically more balance. And people understand how fast it's growing. But it sort of overtook people about 6 or 7 years ago, and then it fell down from there. There's actually, but that's the amount of silicon that's been used has dropped. Even the amount that's being used has dropped dramatically. The silicon inside a panel today is about 15%, 10 to 15% of the actual cost of a panel. It's not, there's only a limited amount you can get out of that. You have to make it more efficient and make it a more technologically efficient panel to really reduce the prices. People are working on that. There's some great things in the lab. I'd love to be able to put some of them on the ground, but they're not as tested as we would like to really say that that's the way we should go.
You have to excuse me, I'm just I know the farm boy, you're gonna have to explain something to me.
I was born downstate Illinois.
If you can produce this solar power at the price you're saying, why don't you just keep it and sell it into California, who's gonna need it within another year or two? At this price, they're not buying any solar power even close to that. I would think they would jump in the middle of this.
So basically, the solar power prices that are being shown right now are in the high 60s. Matter of fact, there's a great example. It's high 60s. So Palo Alto just signed 3 contracts at $69 out of Fresno. So Fresno is, as I said, about 10% less efficient, less solar radiation, like a few more clouds, which would put us in the mid-60s, which would be better. But the problem is for us, is we have to connect. First of all, we have to run it several hundred miles to them, so that it's a loss for them. We have to then also run it to their main line, which is, instead of being 2 miles, we have to run it about 8 to 9 miles, which increases the cost. And we have to step it up to 345 or 500 kV, which also increases the overhead. So we're limited in the amount, and more importantly, we don't get to because we're selling it to you, we get project financing that is cheaper than we would be able to get, and that is worth probably 10 to 15%. In the value of the contract. So we can't do this price to them. We can do close to what they're seeing, but they also have put in place a we'd like to buy California if we can policy. And there's plenty of space in California to.
Just as a comparison, we did bid into Scapa, which is an AWP, into the 500 kV line for 100 megawatts, and our bid price was $72 a megawatt hour. And that was about 6 months ago, maybe almost a year ago now. So since then, prices have substantially dropped. And when we did that, honestly, David came to us and said, Overton is right there. Why are we running 9 miles of transmission? What is the price Overton's paying? So we started, that's when we went and saw Del Mar, and Del Mar said, hey, $58 is the cheapest I've seen. Well, 58 is on par with 70 if we got to go 9 miles and step it up, which is what everybody in California is paying. So really, they're on par as far as the price perspective goes.
Well, 58 for solar is almost unicorn prices.
No, we're not right out of the plant, but when you add transmission and wheeling fees and step up and substation, it goes from 58 to 70 to 75.
We would still be, because of the lack of the financing that we can't get from selling to DWP, for instance, we don't get that, so that would make the plant more expensive, and that takes us back up to around to the high 60s. We're selling to them, which just makes us a Nevada facility when they'd rather buy the same price from Central California. There's no reason for them. There's lots of space in California that they can produce. Someone has a 500 yards to the interconnection, and they don't spend the overhead. That part is not subject to a tax credit, so we don't get a 30% discount on the interconnection. We only get a 30% discount on the solar generation. So that provides quite a bit of overhead.